Shalom, this is Chris with firstcenturychristianity.net. And this message started with an idea that I gave on Shabbat about a message I gave about studying the Bible. I hope you go give that a listen. It's about an hour long. This one's going to be a lot shorter than that. And it gives you lots of insights of how to study to get to the root of the matter and get rid of your own baggage. And it includes how to use academics and how to not use academics. Academics meaning, very educated PhD level sources. How do we evaluate sources? Because there's an infatuation out there with gathering information that comes from outside of the Bible. And by the Bible, I mean the 66-book Bible. And this infatuation runs really deep, and that's what the fork of the road is here. The fork of the road is it begins with Moses or it does not begin with Moses. And in the Bible, there are many forks in the road in our study. That's also a study method technique, a series of binary choices, yes or no, which path am I going to follow? But the Bible says what it says. Messiah said what he said, John 5:46 and 47. If you believe Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? Well, the infatuation with the book of Enoch is that people think that erroneously, incredibly erroneously, that the book of Enoch was written before Moses. They think it's a pre-flood work. It's absolutely not. It was written about maybe 200 years before Yeshua. It was definitely written after the Babylonian exile because it contains mixing. It contains myths and fables from the Babylonian religion. It's mixed in with the true faith. In fact, it may never have been intended to be a serious book. It might even be a fiction book. But so many people are infatuated with this because they think it's by that Enoch, the Enoch that walked with Elohim back in the book of Genesis. But it's not, and it's not that old. And the academics are very dangerous because if they're just looking at Moses and ancient Mesopotamian religions and ancient religions that start in that region of the world as a bunch of religions, and they're all of equal weight, and they're just trying to study history and archaeology as information and data, and they're not treating one of these religions as holy, then you have a problem because they're treating everything equally and they're presenting it to you as equally. And the very famous academic in our circles, whose name I will not say, but you would know, it made his entire career out of mixing the ancient Ugaritic texts and anything that he found in history and in archaeology that had anything to do with a god named El or a god named Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh or anything that had any similarity to the real one true Elohim, Yahweh, in that region, and using that to inform the rest of us about the Torah. No, that's not how this works. That's not how this works at all. In fact, we were specifically commanded to not do that. And that's the problem with academics. Now, you use academics to educate yourself, but understand that their works are not holy. They're not holy men. They're not presenting information to you other than, secular information. They're not telling you about the Bible. They're telling you about history and archaeology and science. But the Ten Commandments strictly forbid us from mixing. And we're not to learn the ways of the nations, specifically those nations in ancient Mesopotamia, in Canaan, and in those regions. And of course, those religions are going to have something to do with the God of Abraham because only Jacob and the 70 went into Egypt. The rest of Abraham's descendants did not go into Egypt. And so that area is going to be heavily informed with the knowledge of the faith of Abraham while they blended in with the worship of Molech and Baal and all these other disgusting demons that were doing horrific things that the book of Leviticus rightly says they were doing these abominations, which is why Moses, or Joshua, ultimately led the Israelites in to decimate the area because of the abominations that they did. We're not supposed to mix. The Torah repeats this command over and over and over and over. No mixing. You don't learn the ways of the nations. You don't do any mixing. Now, today, 2,000 years after Yeshua, we have to learn the mixing. We have to learn the pagan stuff because we have to get it out of our lives. And many of us came into this faith because we learned that Christmas, Sunday, and Easter are all observances that came directly from pagan religions and were brought into Christianity in order to increase converts. And they were Christianized practices, but they're pure pagan practices. Sunday is the day of the invincible sun, S-U-N, not S-O-N. It's Sol Invictus. Sol meaning the Latin word for sun. And then Christmas is part of the Saturnalia. It's part of this Sol Invictus worship. It's part of worshiping the sun, and its practices were all abominable and homosexual and horrible and not good. And Easter is the worship of the goddess that Paul marched into Ephesus to tell people to stop worshiping. And the first century Gentile believers all stopped worshiping these gods and began worship the one true Elohim, which is why Christianity was out of favor with the Romans, because it was pulling people away from the Roman religion. So to think that here today in the year 2025 that we're supposed to go back to that by just learning it the older way is foolishness. It's preposterous. We need to understand that the 66-book Bible brought us to this truth, that those of us that were raised in the Sunday system and read the Bible and realized its errors, we learned the truth about the Sabbath from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. We learned the truth about Christmas and Easter and the other pagan abominations that are in mainstream Christianity. We got rid of that. We started keeping the Sabbath. We started keeping God's holy days. We started eating God's diet, and we started getting closer to him and living our lives in such a way that if the Messiah were to come back today, he would find us doing his Father's will. The 66-book Bible was enough. Now, the fact that we have this desire to continue learning is an addiction. It's something that we have to discipline ourselves. You don't have to stop learning, but you definitely have to evaluate your resources and don't go after that forbidden fruit. Because this is the same sin as the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, Adam was commanded not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Satan enticed Eve into doing it. We had the fall, and now we are where we are. And this desire to have this forbidden knowledge, to think that somehow we are going to know more than Moses, or maybe you even think that Moses knew more. But the Bible reads how it reads, and that Moses met the angel of Yahweh, or Yahweh himself, depending on how it's worded, with the burning bush in Exodus 3. He was introduced to the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, and he got his mission, and he went to Pharaoh with the 10 plagues, and he had the direct line to Elohim as he went up the mountain, and he communed with him, and he got the 10 commandments, and he wrote the Torah, and that's where the beginning of the documentation is for us. Yes, there's more information out there, but do you really want to be part of that information of the nations that were to be dispossessed back then? Because our job is to come out of Babylon. And if we came out of Babylon by Main Street, what good is it if we go back to Babylon by the side roads? If we left Babylon on the big interstate, out leaving Babylon, 65-mile-an-hour speed limit, and we just got out of Babylon, and then we end up on one of these dirt paths, and oh, wait a minute, we were in circles. We're back in Babylon now. We just got there with some fancy ancient language. Well, that's no good. We got to get out of Babylon, and we got to stay out of Babylon. So it becomes, here we come to the fork in the road. Does it begin with Moses, or does it not begin with Moses? Because if it begins with Moses, then that's the religion, that's the faith, that's what the Messiah is saying. If you believed Moses, you would believe him, because Moses wrote of him. He didn't pick any other patriarch. He didn't pick any other figure. He picked Moses because it starts with Moses. The documentation starts with Moses. That's where it begins. If it doesn't begin with Moses, then that's a different religion. And you're free to go down that path. But as for me and my house, we serve Yahweh. I hope you have a blessed rest of your week. Please drop in at firstcenturychristianity.net or come fellowship with us in person in North Kansas City, 1 p.m. on Shabbat, or you could join us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel live streamed.